Let's continue our conversation on Stoicism. I thought we would go back to Seneca because I did a few videos that were non-Seneca related. So, letter 85, complicated letter. I find this one a letter that I struggle with a bit, and I'll try to explain why. But first, let's go through the first part of it. From Seneca to Lucilius, greetings. I had intended to spare you by passing over the remaining complications, content with giving you just a taste of the arguments our school uses to prove that virtue is sufficient by itself to render our life completely happy. But you tell me to include everything, both our own dialectical arguments and the ones that have been worked out to make a laughing stock of us. If I decide to do that, this won't be a letter, it will be a book. I swear to you many times over that I take no pleasure in arguments of that kind. I'm embarrassed to march into battle for gods and men armed with nothing more than a pin. Now he goes into a syllogism. Anyone who is intelligent is also self-controlled. But anyone who is self-controlled is also steady. Anyone who is steady is also untroubled. Anyone who is untroubled is without sadness. Anyone who is without sadness is happy. Therefore, the intelligent person is happy, and intelligence is sufficient for happiness. The syllogism, or to this syllogism, some of the peripatetics reply that when people say of someone that he is untroubled, steady, and without sadness, they mean that he is, for instance, troubled only very occasionally and in moderation, not that he is never troubled at all. Similarly, they say that a person is said to be without sadness when he is not prone to sadness and when that fault is not frequent or excessive in him. They add that human nature does not allow anyone's mind to be immune to sadness, that the sage is not overcome by grief and yet is touched by it, and other similar points that accord with their doctrine. They do not eliminate the emotions, they only restrict them. But how little credit we give the sage if he is merely to be stronger than weaklings, happier than those who are terribly depressed, more restrained than those who are out of control, greater than the lowest of the low. Suppose Ladas were to marvel at what a fast runner he was when he saw behind him were only the crippled and the lame. She'd skim the leaf tips of the growing grain and never bruise the tender blades. In passing, she darted across the swelling sea uplifted and never wet her swift foot in the water. The swiftness, measured by its own standard, not the kind that is praised in comparison with the lowest runners there are. Suppose you were to call a person healthy when he had only a slight fever. A moderate amount of illness is not good health. The wise man is said to be untroubled in the same sense as some types of fruit are said to be seedless, ones in which hard seeds are less noticeable, yet not completely lacking. That's wrong. What I take to be the case with the good man is not that faults are diminished, but that they are absent. There should be none, not small ones, for if there are any, they will grow and eventually become an issue. An aggravated and serious eye infection causes blindness, but a minor infection is troubling as well. I'll stop after this paragraph. If you attribute any emotions at all to the sage, reason will be outmatched by them and will be swept away as by a torrent, and all the more so since you attribute to him not just one emotion to contend with, but all of them. A crowd of emotions, even moderate ones, is more powerful than any single emotion would be even at full force. He feels a desire for money, but a moderate desire. Ambition, but not burning ambition. Anger, but not unrelenting anger. Restlessness, but not too nervous and uneasy restlessness. Lust, but not frenzied lust. It would be easier to deal with someone who had a single thoroughgoing fault than with one who has every fault even though he has them in lesser degree. What I find interesting about this reasoning, that last paragraph makes a lot of sense to me. That's how I would look at it. If you are a sage, you probably do have emotions still, they're just a little less pronounced. Right? Remember the pathos, the passions that the Stoics refer to, anger, frustration, sadness, these kinds of quote-unquote bad emotions because they upset us. What Seneca seems to say in that last paragraph, to me, is a sage has all these things, just less so than other people. Now, one step back. Stoics say, if you wish to grow, emulate the sage, sophos, wise man. Well, it's gendered language, let's just say the sage. And they aspire to be people like, say, Socrates. That they said, well, that's a sage. Now, that's a sage. that's someone we should be like that. I think that in itself is a very good practice. Try to emulate someone you respect a lot for whatever reason. In the case of Socrates, well, that probably was a very wise person, so it makes sense to try and emulate that sage. What I object to a bit with here is how this letter starts off by saying, and the sage is completely void of any of these bad things. Is not emotional, does not get upset, does not get angry, does not get sad. And I guess the flip side of that is then also does not get happy. If you really are trying to extirpate emotions, then I think that goes both ways, positive and negative emotions. Anyway, the biggest issue I have with this is that I understand where Seneca is coming from. He says a sage, if you're going to emulate a sage, that person better be really, really good, basically perfect. And as a result, that person will not suffer from any of these things that quote-unquote normal human beings like you and I suffer from. But I don't think that's achievable, and therein lies the rub, as the kids say. That's the problem. I don't think such a person exists. I've never met Socrates, obviously, but I'd be hard-pressed to believe that Socrates had no flaws whatsoever. Because I don't think you're human if you don't have any flaws. I know that I will never be a sage, because I have way too many flaws. That's not false modesty, it's just a reality. And I think all of us have a lot of flaws. Certainly, some more than others, and different levels, but there's no perfect person. And that's the whole trick. We're human beings. We make mistakes. We do things wrong. And then we have to deal with that. The outcome of that. So, the reason, from a psychological perspective, why I object to this image of the sage as a perfect person to emulate is that it might give people the impression that they have to be perfect. If you want to be a Stoic, you should aspire to be a sage, and that means being perfect. No more bad emotions. Never be angry, never be upset, never be frustrated, never be sad, never be any of these things. And guess what? That ain't possible. Even the most balanced person out there will sometimes be frustrated, will sometimes be angry or upset. This is natural behavior. Now, if you want to be a Stoic, of course, the point of being a Stoic is that you get less upset by things that used to upset you. Less frustrated, less angry, less sad, because you work on that. That's the whole point, right? The progress that you make. But the danger in trying to be perfect is that you're not perfect. And we know from various kinds of psychotherapy that are used today, for example, cognitive behavioral therapy, all this kind of stuff, we know that if people try to be perfect, that makes them neurotic because they're going to fail. You could, for example, let's say, I've noticed this in the past, I got frustrated very easily. And with what I think is a pretty serious study of Stoicism, I feel that it's become less easy for me to get frustrated over certain small things. Still difficult, and some days it works better than other days, but relative to how it was, I've made some progress, which is good. I want to make more progress. But I know that there will never be a day that I'm never frustrated, because then it would be inhuman, which some people think I am already. Anyway, that's the point. If you aspire to be perfect, every time you fail, which you will, because you're a human being, you will feel bad about yourself. You will feel that you have failed. And that, in my mind, is the danger in reasoning like this, what Seneca is proposing here. The sage is perfect. Great. But I'm not a sage. And neither are you. I'm sorry, I hate to break it to you, you're not. Neither of us are. None of us are. It's just not, we're human beings. We have flaws. We do things wrong. That's the whole point. The point is to do better tomorrow. or next time, or an hour from now. Next time you're in that situation where you feel you didn't do so well, you should do better. That is progress. Progress is enough. Now, you have to be careful. It's easy to kind of warp this argument into something like, oh, I can do whatever I want and say, well, I didn't make enough progress, make more progress. That's not how it works. It has to be a sincere effort. But if you're making a sincere effort and you mess up, which again, you will, like speaking about myself too, right? I still do. Take a step back and then think, okay, now what can I do differently next time so that next time I don't do this thing, which I think was wrong this time. I did get frustrated, I did get angry, I did get upset. What can I do next time? And you make that change. And if you genuinely make that change, and next time you feel, that's interesting, I'm not as frustrated as I used to be, that's progress and that's good. Just accept that under no circumstance, no matter how much you practice, you're going to be perfect, because you won't be. And that's why I think this is strange reasoning, to say aspire to the sage to be perfect, because you won't be, ever. This is human nature. It would be very disturbing if we were perfect. Think about how boring life would be. I don't think that's a good thing. It'd be great. It'd be tranquil and peaceful. It would be boring too. You would give up part of your human nature. And this is a discussion I have with people sometimes online when I post something, a negative comment I receive or whatever. People say, oh, but Stoic, you should not feel anything. That's not possible. It's impossible to not feel anything because then you're inhuman. But trust me, I feel a lot less than I used to about some of these frustrating things. That's progress to me, and that's good enough. Continue to work on that, right? Let me know what you think. I know that may now sound like a leading question. It's not meant to be a leading question. What do you think about emulating perfection? Is that helpful to you? Because I can also see the argument if you strive for the highest possible, and that's great. I just don't think it's ever achievable. But that's just me. I want to hear from you too. So let me know. Hope this was useful. I'll gladly see you later. Bye.